Up until the 1920s, the rugged highlands of New Guinea were thought to be a world still in the violent throes of creation, too physically hostile to be inhabited. When prospectors carried out the first expedition into the area in the 1930s, they not only found rivers of gold, they discovered a world teeming with people, countless tribes who knew nothing of the outside world. With missionaries and prospectors clamoring to be allowed into the territory, the Australian government knew that these people couldn't remain in isolation forever. In 1938, they sent 3 young patrol officers, Jim Taylor, John Black, and Pat Walsh, on an extraordinary journey to bring the peoples of the area under government control. With an entourage of over 200 carriers and police, they set out from Mount Hagen on an expedition that would take 15 months and cover over 3,000 kilometers in some of the most inhospitable country in the world. The Hagen Sea Pick Patrol became the longest and most arduous patrol in New Guinea's history, making first contact with Stone Age tribes who had never seen white men before and knew nothing of guns, gold, or government. "50 years later, Jim Taylor's daughter, Meg, took time off from her legal practice and set out on her own journey of discovery, following the footsteps of her father's epic patrol.
It's a personal journey, and it's a part of letting go of great men in history. In the last 12 months, both Jim Taylor and John Black have died, and this journey for me is a way of letting history be history and getting on with my own life. And I felt I could only do that and put it at rest by going to the places that these men had walked, walk over the same mountains and rivers, and hopefully by the end of this long patrol, spirits will be settled, so to speak. I asked my father once, why did he marry my mother? And he said that she was the embodiment of everything that he loved about this country. I feel very honoured to have known the man more than anything. A man that had great sensitivity towards the Papua New Guinean, and a foresight to see that his journey there may in itself cause total disruption to a society that was well organised.
I was on the island of Manus when I received my orders. It was great news to me that I was to return to my beloved mountains. My second in command was John Black, a student of anthropology and a patrol officer of many years' experience in the mountains. As we organized our carriers and prepared our stores, I thought of the people we were going to encounter. People who live well-ordered lives and, though low in material culture, are free from the modern terrors of the motor car and radio. On March the 9th, 1938, we set off westward from Mount Hagen. A journey, no doubt, that'll change their world forever.
When my father left Mount Hagen 50 years ago, it was still in the Stone Age. Today, it's a town with all the benefits and problems that come with development. But most of my country's 3 million people don't live in the towns. They live in the rural areas. This journey for me is a way of seeing how they've been affected since my father first made contact with them 50 years ago. There are differences between my father's patrol and ours. They didn't have any maps, and we do. We have an idea where we're going to sleep tonight, and they didn't. But we do have one thing in common. They didn't know if they were going to make it through, and neither do we. The 1938 expedition took 15 months to penetrate country that was unexplored. We plan to take about 2.5 months to cover much of the same area. Even with modern technology, I knew it would be physically demanding and potentially dangerous. We're going to travel through country that is still inaccessible. We started off with a party of 18, including members of my family, friends, soldiers from the Papua New Guinea Defence Force, and historian Bill Gamage. It's a relief to be out of town and on the road finally, but I think we're going to start encountering frustrations along the way with bridges not intact. I think this is part of the adventure of living in this country and minor compared to what the first patrol had. After rebuilding 2 bridges, we realised the vehicles were taking up much more time than we could afford, so we decided to abandon them. We sent word out that we needed carriers to carry cargo from one point to another. And a lot of people have come because it's a way of earning cash. And they also know that there's an adventure in it for them too. Once we started using carriers, I felt that we started to get into the mood of the 1938 patrol. We started to feel what the explorers in 1938 must have felt. We were in contact with the people, relying on them to carry for us. And this was really the beginning of it all. From now on, with 2,000 kilometres between us and home, we'll have to rely on our feet, the goodwill of the people we meet in the villages, and my father's journal as our guide.
The column of 257 moved off slowly and wound its way over the grass hills, following like a long black snake the meandering paths worn deep by generations of native feet. The art of traveling in New Guinea is the art of finding the existing tracks by using the local people as guides. It should be possible, I believe, to travel across the entire country in this manner. It is my aim to make contact with as many tribes as possible and work among them without casualty or angry words, to explain to them that a new era of peace has come and teach them that we come to help them, not to harm them.
My father was very concerned about this expedition. His main task was to cover the territory and not lose any of his carriers or any of his police, and to get through country that around the corner there could have been hostile tribes that would ambush them.
Fighting is natural to these people. They see birds and animals and every living thing fighting. They cannot imagine people who do not. If the patrol is attacked, we are strong enough to defend ourselves. But I always feel a sense of failure if I find it necessary to use armed force against the warriors of primitive New Guinea. It's ironic, but a fact of life. To gain respect and bring peace to hostile tribes, it's often necessary to demonstrate weapons more powerful than their own. But the most difficult problem we face is convincing people of our peaceful intentions. People who have never seen men with white skin before.
Some pictures here, taken in 1938 of people and places, which I'd like to show you. Is that all right?
50 years ago, the people of Aipu were entirely unaware that there was any life different from theirs. As far as they knew, they were the sole inhabitants of the earth. When they first saw Taylor in black, they didn't think they were human.
When the white men first appeared, we thought they were spirits of some kind. Possibly the spirits of the dead that we'd planted and had come back to life. We thought they might destroy our pigs and food gardens, and we were very worried about that, so we attacked the patrol and wounded a policeman. But one of our men was shot through the forehead, and we then realized that they were more powerful than us.
With the skill of a bullet, the people of Aipu were thrust into the 20th century. Their way of life and everything they believed in and cherished was suddenly in question. The most surprising thing that I've noticed here is that there is a shortage of young men. When we've asked for carriers to carry cargo from one point to another, the response has been from older men. We've been told that all the young men have gone to the goldfields at Mount Kari nearby. Before my father came here, gold had no value to these people. Now gold has had a dramatic effect on their lives. The young men leave their families and go and live in very rugged conditions for months on end. They certainly have a newfound wealth, but the cost to community life is huge.
As we journey westward, we are traveling back in time. Very little has changed here for thousands of years, except we are told of the recent appearance of a strange bird-like creature in the skies.
We were returning to our village from the gardens when we heard a sound we'd never heard before. It was coming from above. When I looked up, I saw a bird unlike any I had ever seen before, shining like the waters of the lake. Someone said it must have come from the spirit world. Whatever it was not of our world.
When we arrived at Hoyavia, the men crowded around us. Some were confident, others timid, but all excited. They bore a distinctive appearance with their large mop of hair pulled over each ear and decorated with purple and gold everlastings. They imagine apparently that we were spirits and that their women would die should they see us. I told the people by outstretching my arms that the bird they had seen would be coming here soon. The work on the landing ground was carried out by our carriers, who set to it with a will. Unfortunately, the work was in vain. The only plane available was too low-powered for such a short strip.
It was the 31st of May, 1938. My father's camera was loaded with colour film to capture the first airdrop for exploration ever attempted, not only in New Guinea, but the world.
The local natives sat in silent amazement. To them, it had a vast religious significance. For perhaps thousands of years, they have believed in a world above, to where their gods ascended after founding the great tribes. It was to them as it was to the shepherds who watched their flocks on the outskirts of Bethlehem nearly 2,000 years ago.
In the last 50 years, the aeroplane has had a dramatic effect on the lives of the Highland people. It's become a lifeline to the outside world, but it's brought with it government administrators and missionaries with a different way of seeing the world. But the effect of contact here at Lake Copiago seems less obvious than we've seen in other places. In 50 years, the social structure doesn't appear to have changed very much. The women still are the backbone of society. They do most of the work. They carry a lot of the responsibility for rearing the children and being the providers of food. While family life and the role of women remain unchanged, the men appear idle and restless without war.
Every man and youth carries pan pipes. They blow gently upon them, and mournful notes like wind in the trees come forth. This primitive music is tuneful but sad to listen to. A man will play them, I am told, when a girl he loves marries another.
I felt a great sense of anticipation and excitement that today was the day we would be heading for the Strickland Gorge. This was really the thrust westward for the 1938 expedition. But unfortunately, the excitement didn't last very long. The carriers wanted to renegotiate their position, wanted double rates for carrying. Otherwise, they were going to leave us stranded. We couldn't agree to being blackmailed, so we had to resort to another way. A journey that took my father about a week to complete took us only 20 minutes. When I looked down from the helicopter and saw the rugged terrain of the Strickland Gorge, I was relieved to be flying over it and not walking through it. This magnificent country was an almost impenetrable barrier to my father's patrol. He wrote that in this gorge he felt an infinitesimal speck pitting itself against mighty nature. In the Strickland Gorge, we wanted to identify the exact position of the original crossing. All we had to use as our guide was my father's journal and photographs that were taken during the 1938 patrol. After a 2-hour walk, we found the site of the original crossing, and by coincidence, it was 50 years to the day.
The Strickland runs so fast and is so wide that the local people have never met the tribes on the other side. Any attempt to swim across could easily end in fatality. But a constable and my servant braved the crossing and secured a rope to the other side. A pulley was rigged to send supplies over to those working there. Pylons were built at each side, and slowly a bridge took shape. Two weeks later, it was complete. But ahead lay the worst ascent I had ever known. A 2,000-foot mountainside of crumbling limestone. Looking down at the gorge beneath was almost sickening. It was every man for himself. If he slipped, he must go to the bottom unless he could save himself by his own efforts. That the carriers overcame this difficulty without loss of a man or gear speaks well of their tenacity.
It's here on the Strickland River that I feel the magnitude of the 38 Patrol and feel strongly the spirit of my father and John Black, the explorers. After we'd crossed the Strickland Gorge, what lay ahead of us was the ascent over the Victor Emmanuels, one of the longest mountain ranges in Papua New Guinea. I knew that the climb would be difficult. It would be almost a vertical climb of 2,000 meters. It would really be a test of everybody's fitness.
The New Guinea forest is always beautiful. For anyone that has seen it from the air, it's dark and forbidding. And to those who've struggled to find a passage through it, it's almost terrifying. Once beneath its green canopy, these feelings pass away in sympathy for the trees, striving in their combative world, just as we. In addition to my principal objectives, it's my aim to collect species of flora and fauna, in particular, those that have not been seen by Europeans before.
From what my father had told me, I realized this is what patrolling was all about. But all the physical training wouldn't prepare the muscles or the mind for trekking in this kind of country. It's constant mud underfoot, a constant weight on your feet, which means extra strain on the back muscles and on the thigh muscles. The climb just seems endless. We've got 80 kilometres ahead of us before we reach the western frontier of my father's patrol. I'm starting to wonder how he and his men coped in this kind of country for 15 months. The next day we arrived at a mission station called Tekken. It's a relief to be out of the mud and dampness for a while. In my father's journal, he wrote about the poor health of the people in this area and was concerned about the impact of his patrol on their lives, especially the European diseases they might bring.
We are the harbingers of disease to which the native has little or no resistance. If they are subjected to continuous epidemics, then I believe the race will perish. We must do all we can.
Thank you so much. Scale 13.5.
I'm sure he'd be pleased to see the medical centre here set up by the mission. And it's run by Papua New Guinean nurses who take a great pride in their work. Sepeka, Sako! Hi, Avinon. Oh. Hey, Mama. It was one of the aims of our patrol to meet as many of the surviving carriers as possible. You plan me like story here. You go story liga. All right. Sepeka carried Taylor's gun, and Sako carried his ammunition for the whole 15-month journey of the 1938 expedition.
When we fell ill or were injured, Jim Taylor would stop the patrol and rest us for a few days until we recovered. Jim Taylor and John Black were good men. If they weren't, we would have all died.
We're apprehensive about the journey ahead, but we realise that we have one less element to worry about, and that is that our carriers are familiar with the area. The carriers on my father's patrol weren't.
As we prepared to leave, people advised us against going on. We would surely be destroyed by the barbarians to the west, who are as numerous as the stars, they said. Families cried for their brave loved ones who were about to journey with us. Many had never ventured outside of their tribal lands, and now they were to travel through their enemy's territory and beyond into the nether world where superstition and spirits reign.
The carriers told us that in the days of their ancestors, there were two roads one could travel. One way was the safe road, and on the other you would be stopped by a fearsome dog. With the coming of Christianity, these people have more freedom to go places their ancestors couldn't. But superstitions still persist. When we crossed a river that was traditionally a place of silence, no one spoke a word. We were exhausted from climbing at high altitude, and the dampness was getting us down. I was getting malaria. I had constant headaches and feeling nausea and dizziness. My back was aching, and I had no strength to go on.
Here there is always the danger of accident or attack, and sickness may come, but we must conquer it on the march. If the spirit falters, it means death and a grave in a foreign land.
Not being able to get constant supply of fresh food, especially vegetables and fruit, had a drastic effect on our health. Everybody lost a considerable amount of weight. But we made the most of the food that we had, and we really enjoyed our mealtime, and we started to improvise with our dishes. But it still wasn't like a good home-cooked dinner. We still had another 6 days walking to reach Telefomin, the western frontier of the 38th Patrol, and we'd have to rely heavily on the strength of our carriers to get us there.
We travelled over the rugged foothills to the forested mountains above, where everything is wet, dripping and silent, and up to the grasslands, to the alpine regions, where one is seldom warm and nearly always hungry, and never a grumble from the carriers. On first climbing the New Guinea mountains, I had found it nearly unbearable and wondered how any European could stand it, except for short periods. But after a while, the leg muscles ceased to pain, and it became an enjoyment. And the crest of each ridge or summit of each mountain, something to be conquered, and the achievement completely satisfying.
We're now at the headwaters of the Sepik River. It's taken us much longer than we thought to reach Telefomin. We've journeyed through some beautiful country, magnificent country, but it's also been a very hard journey. It's been hard on the carriers and it's been hard on the walkers. On the Alpine Pass that we've walked, we came across 4 mounds of earth, which the carriers identified as bodies of people from the Oxartman area who had died of cold and hunger. So it's not an easy trek, and it's not a well-worn track as it was when the patrol came through in 1938. For the next 5 days, we had to find our way through almost trackless jungle. Everybody and everything was soaked right through, and our rations were dangerously low. I began to realize that we'd underestimated this country. After 9 grueling days in the bush, we arrived at Faramin. It was wonderful to reach open space and at last get fresh food. I bought a pig, and the carriers celebrated our safe arrival with a feast called a mumu, just as my father's carriers had 50 years earlier.
When in distant places, I know our carriers long for home, where the grass is greener, the water sweeter, the food better, and the speech correct. The payment of tomahawks, shells, and a saucepan that they will receive at the end of it all is paltry when one thinks of their great effort. But from my experience, they will be very pleased and satisfied.
All right, now time me talk. Me ready finish. You look straight Lambokis picture. All right?
It's an achievement, I believe, that these people who until a few years ago had never heard of the white man are taking their part in bringing civilization to the remotest tribes of all.
Kupla.
We left the next day without any food supplies because we'd eaten all our food the night before. We also believed that we only had a few hours to reach Telefomin. But we took the wrong track, and instead of 2 hours, it took us the whole day. We arrived weak, hungry, and feeling pretty foolish.
It's a relief to reach Telefomin, the western frontier of our patrol. The people are cannibals, and not in the least ashamed of it. No man is, I suppose, responsible for the habits and conventions of the community into which he is born. But once our plan of pacification has been effected and war ceases, the availability of human flesh will surely diminish, and within a generation, the custom will be a thing of the past.
When the Hagen-Sepik patrol came, they brought all sorts of new goods. Matches, salt, knives, tomahawks. And these were things we didn't know about before and really added to our lives. And then they sent other white men. They brought us new ways of building houses, schools, and new habits of thought, new ways of looking at the world. And this really enriched our lives. And we're really grateful for the white man coming.
Today, Telefomin is a government outstation, but I feel a strong mission influence here. Most towns have a rhythm, but I couldn't pick up a rhythm in Telefomin.
Keep in the middle of the king's highway. Keep in the middle of the road. Don't take to your right, don't take to your left. Keep in the middle of the road. Don't turn around, don't look behind. Satan will turn you back.
It's a great disappointment to me to see that the culture of the people has been affected so drastically, because the mission has virtually made a black and white statement that the old ways are not good and only the new ways are good. And that, I don't think, is a healthy approach to the development of any person or any country.
I have never been able to understand why missionaries teach him that his dances are evil, his singing evil, and his body evil, and to have more than one wife will bring eternal damnation. Monogamy is the desirable state, I believe, but there is no need to press it. The increase in the male population due to the cessation of tribal war will do all that is necessary.
This afternoon, the members of the Hagen-Sepik Patrol, especially the Papua New Guinea Defence Force, are going to show the students here at Telefomin High School some of the bush skills that they have and how they've been using them on this patrol. Unlike many of his colleagues, my father believed education was paramount to the development of the people of Papua New Guinea. Clean, that's why I've got this tinea in between all my toes now. He'd be so pleased to see the grandchildren of the people he met on his patrol now attending high school at Telefomin. But I'm sure he'd be sad to know that they might be losing their traditions and culture. For the next 3 days, we walked to the headwaters of the May River, to a place called Myanmin. Compared to Telefomin, we seem to have travelled to another world. The people here live simple, uncomplicated lives, of no great material wealth, but a richness of spirit and tradition. It's hard to imagine that in this peaceful place, my father's patrol met its fiercest attack. Mirimap, me like save long this la time, patrol long, telana John Black olikam long this la hap, lo mian min. You know story, first time you play looking on white man.
Ore, hari naka yetri piota, hari naka yetri piota.
When we attacked them, we thought to ourselves, these were not Telefomin men. Some of them were white-skinned. Theirs was a different kind of fighting. The noise was nothing like we'd ever heard before. It was continuous. It was thunderous. I was nearly sick with fear. When we were running away, the rifle shots kept coming. They were just missing me, and I was weaving in and out. But I escaped. One man was shot by a policeman, and he drowned in his own blood. We ran away, and when we returned, the strangers were gone. My feeling now is that it is a better time, without all kinds of war.
Come. Hey, call him name long in.
Yetwin. Yetwin.
Oi, and strong mangi, yeah.
Yes.
That's got big goose. Today, Myanmar is as close as we've come to paradise. This is the heart and soul of the New Guinea my father taught me about. But I feel a vulnerability here and wonder how long this way of life will survive. From Myanmar, we set off from the Upper May River to the Sepik, the longest river in Papua New Guinea. Ahead of us, a 5-day journey downstream by canoe. The Sepik is a welcome rest from walking. But for Barry Taverner, our photographer, the rest has come too late. He has hepatitis and has to leave the patrol.
There is something living about this river. Near forested banks, I could hear the insect world alive, like the distant roar of a big city. This is headhunting country. When the river narrows, my barges make perfect targets for bowmen on the banks. If they shoot at us, they could not fail to hit someone. In case of disaster involving my death, they are to keep going until they reach the area of the Sepik under the administration's control. As well as the threat of attack, we have to contend with a diminishing food supply. So we supplement our diet with sak-sak, a food made from sago palm. The fibre from the trunk is chopped as fine as possible. The process is tedious for people who have not yet acquired steel. The fibre is washed and strained, and the sago flour is made into a pancake and baked. But sak-sak is almost pure starch. If we were to eat it 6 days in a row without any other food, we would be dead by the 7th.
Life on the Sepik appears to move as slowly as the river, but as deep as the river, because their culture is alive. Through all the contact that's happened with Western civilization, the Sepik culture is extremely resilient. Many of the old traditions that were not good have gone, but the heart and soul of what is theirs will never be lost.
Music is an integral part of religion for Sepik people. The flute is a sacred object. When a pair is played in concert, it is said to be the voice of a water spirit.
On the Sepik, I feel less of a confrontation between our two worlds. There's a blending of the old spirits and the new, without losing tradition and art.
As we journey east, we can hear the pom, pom, pom of war drums from where we have come. But soon the shields will be broken and bows put aside, and peace will come to stay. But if we want tribal war to cease, we must put something in its place. Otherwise, they will perish from lack of interest in life.
During the 8th week, we climb from the lowlands to the highlands again, up some of the steepest but most beautiful country we'd seen. By the time we reached Maramuni, 4 more of the patrol had to pull out. Boils, torn ligaments, malaria, and infected feet were impossible to treat out here. Those of us left behind knew we'd miss them. Oh, during this patrol, often I thought, what on earth am I doing out here? I mean, there were difficulties, the logistics and personalities, of course, and this whole patrol took on a life of its own that I thought I could handle, but I found difficult. I think because my own emotions were so involved in it, rewalking something that Jim had done, something that was an epic journey, an epic expedition in this part of the world. Walking from Tekken to Telefoam and the difficulties with malaria, I thought I was crazy for continuing. But now that we're almost at the end of it, it's been the most wonderful and exciting adventure I've ever had. And it's in my own country, too. You looking success?
Yeah,
Papa?
Mr. Tilley. Em Kapman belum people. You know what one blow.
On our patrol, I was constantly prepared to meet people who had a negative attitude about my father's role in contact. But the attitude was that that belonged to that time. And because of the incidents that happened, because of the 38 Patrol, there was no more fighting within their own areas, that life now for them was far more peaceful than it was 50 years ago. We were reinforced all along by the positiveness of my father's contribution to their way of life. As social issues became problematic, he was concerned about the role that the administration that he served under had played in all this. Perhaps they had done things the wrong way, that they hadn't prepared the people enough for the onslaught of Western civilization.
Hey, no problem.
Today, the terrors and treasures of the outside world have come to Maramuni. The day we arrived was the first time these people had ever seen television. On this patrol, I've seen the effects of contact at close quarters. I've seen it in the towns and I've seen it in the rural areas. The greatest challenge for our people is to find the strength to take the best from the new world and blend it with the best of the old world and not lose their identity.
But why? Because that's the way it's done. Well, if that is the way it is done, then that is the way you must do it.
They have come to realize that we are men, not spirits. I have been able to tell them who we are and of our purpose, and how roads will come and fighting cease, and civilization will extend to them from Mount Hagen. They were enthusiastic about this and said that they hoped the road would come soon.
I think we've all been irreversibly affected by this extraordinary country and its people, and humbled by the magnitude of Jim Taylor and John Black's epic journey. Theirs was a different time and a purpose far more confronting to them than the miles underfoot. I now know my father more deeply and now share his one true passion, Papua New Guinea.
And Pius.
2 weeks after completing the patrol, Meg Taylor was asked to represent Papua New Guinea as ambassador to the United States.